So, good evening. We are learning as Chutzur for Shlem Filan Chaya Basar. We're on Kuf Aleph Amid Beis, where I think up to Amar Ma, right? So we had the machlekes between Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon on one side, and we had Rav Nechemia on the other side about what happened. What was the conversation between Moshe and Aaron, when Moshe said, you know, you were commanded to eat the karbonis, even in spite of your aninus. And Aaron answered back, but if I, in such a situation, could I have possibly have eaten the karbonis? And Moshe was masking to what Aaron said. So Nehemiah said that Aaron's taina was that I was an oinen, and an oinen is not allowed, which obviously you have to understand. But there was a commandment specifically here. So Rav Nehemiah answered that the answer would be that he's mechalik between the chatas, which is what Aaron burnt, which wasn't specifically for the miluim. It was a generic type of carbon. They always do chatas rish chaydish. So that's why he that had to be burnt. There was no permit for Aaron to eat it. So that was the discussion. And on the other hand, Yehuda and Rav Shimon, they said the issue, no, that this would have been included. It would have been allowed to eat, but the problem was it became tamei. The issue was that they couldn't eat it, that it had to be eaten at night. There was only a heter to eat it by day, but to eat it at night, but not at day. So they were waiting to eat it at night, and then it became tamei, and that's why it had to be burnt. That was the two shitas. But in the middle of the brisa before, we had a taina that Yehuda and Rav Shimon said to Reb Nechemia, Amar Mai, Hayu l'shloshtam she'sarfu. There should have been 3 karbanos that should have been burnt. They asked Reb Nechemia, according to you, that it was aninus, there should have been 3 burnt. My shloshtam, the Tanya. Ve'sar achatas dorish Moshe. The pasuk says the seir chatas Moshe went and asked what happened to it. Soyer is Esar Nachshon. So the Soyer is the Sar of Nachshon. Nachshon was the Rosh Shevet of Yehuda, who that was his day to bring a chatas. And chatas zuchatas shmini. The chatas was the chatas for the 8th day. That means, in addition, the Yidden each day would bring a carbon tzibur, chatas tzibur, for lekavod de miluim. And Darish, Sar Shal Rosh Chodesh. And the final one, the Darish, is a reference to the Sar Shal Rosh Chodesh. Yachol Shlosh Nisrafu. I might think that all 3 of them were burnt. And so the pasuk continues, and Moshe Rabbeinu said it was burnt. He only said 1 was burnt. He didn't say 3 of them were burnt. Echad Nisraf, V'lo Shloshtan Nisrafu. The 1 was burnt and 3 were, and not 3. So the Gemara. So that's the Gemara is just explaining what was the shakal v'tarya that happened here.
Didn't Rav Nechemia hold that it was only those of not Ladairis?
Yeah, that's what we said. The chatas is not Ladairis, but the ones that were Ladairis were burnt.
Right.
The
so,
others,
but of here, only 2 out of 3 are only 1 out of the 3 were Ladairis.
Right. So we're saying that was the only one that was burnt. That's what we're explaining. We're setting it up how it worked for.
Oh, you're saying.
So Nechemia would say that the 2 that were specifically miluim, both the one for Nachshon and for the Kahal for Klal Yisrael, those were taka eaten, but the one that was Rosh Chodesh, which was non-miluim specific, was burnt. Zaktamar Darish straight Drisha Slama. Why did it say Darish twice? So that the Gemara explains that it was 2 drishas. He said, why is this one burnt? Meaning the chatas was burnt, and why were the other 2 chatoyas left over? I wouldn't know which one was burnt and which one wasn't. When the pasuk says that this one that was burnt was given to ameliorate the oven of the congregation, The Sarah Wish Chodesh was a chatas that was a kapara for certain tumas, while the chatayis of Nachshon, the chatayis of the Miluim, were just chatas that the Rebbe Shalom commanded the Yidden to bring. Zok the Gemara, Shaper Ka'amri Lay. I'm sorry, did I skip? So the Gemara Shaper Ka'amri Lay. The Gemara says they have a good taina on Reb Nechemia. If why taka were the other two now? We haven't yet said. I said it at the beginning of the Yomid, but now the Gemara is going to explain it. Reb Nechemia holds that Kotche Shah, the things that were only for the Miluim, the Aninus wasn't passing, but the Chatas Rosh Chodesh, it did pass. So now we continue weiter with the discussions. That was the first question that they asked on Nechemia. Amamar Hayeloi Le'echel Le'erev. He also said, why, if it was if he's saying they didn't eat it because of Aninus, why didn't they wait with even the Chatas Rosh Chodesh and wait for nightfall? Shapik Amalek Savar Aninus Laila Deraisa. You could say that Aninus Laila is Deraisa. And the final question, Davar Acha, that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon asked Rabbi Nechemia of Ale Pinchas Hayi Moen, why did they say that we couldn't eat it ba'aninus on Rosh Chodesh because there were no Kehanim that were not ba'aninus? The only Kehanim were Aaron and his two sons, Elazar and Isamar. What about Pinchas? Why wasn't Pinchas another Kohen? He wasn't a Einin. He was the son of Elazar. He was a nephew. A nephew is not ba'aninus. Right? Pinchas was the grandson of Aaron. He was the son of one of the two sons who lived, not the ones who died. If we all know about Pinchas and Parshas Pinchas, that he killed Zimri, and Rebbe Lazar holds that that's when he first became a Kohen. This was the Parsha of Pinchas, as we know, was all the way at the end of the Chumash, much later than the building of the Mishkan, which was at the beginning of the 40 years. The Ma'aseh of Zimri was at the end of the 40 years. So that's when he became a Kohen. Says that the Ma'aseh of Zimri, that's when he became a Kohen. That was a bris kun asylum. Rav Ashi has the same teretz as generally, but he just has specifically a little bit different. He says it wasn't by the Ma'aseh of Zimri that he became a Kohen, but even later, when the Yidden were already in Eretz Yisrael, and they had tainus on the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, that they put up a Mizbeach, and they thought it was Mizbeach v'Avodah Zarah, and they sent Pinchas, and Pinchas said no, he determined that they were just putting up the Mizbeach for the Rebbeinu Shalom, not for Avodah Zarah, and he made Shalom. It's called Pinchas HaKoyin. So we know that that's when he became a Kohen. How does he understand what it says? That it said by Zimri. How could he say it was only later? The Gemara says that was just a bracha that eventually he and his family were going to be Kohanim. What is the mandam who says it was by Zimri? What does he do with the pasuk that it said later on by the near miss with the Melchama with Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven? That was just to say that his children, when it says it's just to say that his children will also be Kohanim, that they're going to be the same yichus amongst Kohanim. They're going to be the Kohen Gadol are going to come from him. Amar Rav. Now we're going to a different topic. Very interesting. Moshe Rabbeinu Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu had the status of a Kohen Gadol, and he got a chelik in the Kachim. Shenemar me'el hamilu and l'Moshe haya l'mana. That Moshe Rabbeinu, at the time of the Miluim, this is still part of that same parsha, I think, yeah, he got Vayikach Moshe as a chaza v'yinefeu t'nufel l'fnei Hashem. He took the chaza of the animal. Me'el hamiluim l'Moshe haya l'mana. He got it as his chelik, so that was being treated as a kohen. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu has a kohen. Meisvei. Pinchas hayiman. We said a kasha that Pinchas should have been treated, should have been able to eat it because he was a kohen. V'misa leim aval Moshe Rabbeinu hayiman. Why couldn't Moshe Rabbeinu be the one to eat it? They said we had no kohanim to eat it. Everyone was an einanim, so we said maybe Pinchas. So we said the reason why Pinchas wasn't yet a kohen, but Moshe Rabbeinu was already a kohen. So Moshe the Torah b'shchina. Moshe was not available. He was not around to eat the kachim. The amamam Moshe b'ashkama alu b'ashkama yard. Moshe every day when he was talking to the Baruch Shalom, he'd get up early in the morning and go up on high, and he would come down at late at night. He had no time to be eating anything. Meisvei lechem elikav mikachay hakadoshim umin hakadoshim miyachel. This is talking about a balmum. He eats from the Kodesh Kadoshim and from the Kachim Kalim. Im Nemru Kachim Kalim, Lama Nemru Kachim. If Nemru Kachim Kachim, Lama Nemru Kachim Kalim. If Nemru Kachim Kalim, Lama Nemru Kachim Kachim. Why did the pasuk have to tell you that Baal Mum can eat both Kachim Kachim and Kachim Kalim? So the Gemara Nemru Kachim Kalim. If it wouldn't have said Kachim Kalim, the Chayr you'd say he's allowed to eat Kachim Kachim. He certainly could eat Kachim Kalim. You say I'm a Kachim Kachim who ta'oichel shari hutru lazar. There are cases where Kachim Kachim are eaten by a zar. The chatas, the Gemara understands it at this point. That's talking about the chatas of the El Miluim that we just said that Moshe Rabbeinu ate. Shari Hutul Zar Lahen, that it's mutter for Zar, it's also mutter to Mum. Kashim Kalam Yochel. So there, but I would say Kachim Kalam you can't eat. We have an example of Kachim being hutter to a Zar, so maybe it will also be mutter to a Balmum. So if you just said Kachim, I wouldn't know Kachim Kalam. Bilo Nemer Kachim Kalim. You know, never kachim kachim. You say, I remember kachim kalim ye'echel shein kalim. Kachim kachim lo ye'echel. That's very pashut. Why you have to say kachim kachim? Just because the Baal Mum could eat something that's of a lesser kedusha, you wouldn't know it could eat something that's more kedusha. Like kach nemer kachim kachim, like kach nemer kachim kalim. Katani miyas shahari hotru lazar ulahen. But in the course of saying this, we said that it's mutter to a zar, to Moshe Rabbeinu, and to the hem. Lav Moshe. Isn't that talking about Moshe? Was saying Moshe was a zar. He was allowed to eat it. So this is not like Rav, who said that he was a Kohen Gadol. He said he was a Kohen. Rav Sheshis, no, it's not a reference to Moshe. Einachanami, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to eat it as a Kohen. It's talking about Bama. We're talking about that a Bama has a whole different set of rules. A Bama, the Avodah can be done by a Zar, and it can be eaten by a Zar. L'Zar, u'kedivrei Aimer, yesh minchas v'Bama. Mincha b'bama. It's like according to the Manam that says a mincha could be brought by a bama. Rashi explains that all the other karbanis are not relevant. Shlamim is not eaten by the kayin, and the you can't bring any karbanis chayva on a bama. You can only bring karbanis nadava. An oila, there's nothing eaten; it all gets burnt up. So the only example you have by a bama where the food gets eaten by a zar that would have otherwise been eaten by a kayin is the mincha. So that's why we say it's according to Madam that you can bring a mincha. So that's what you have. Kachim are eaten by a zar. So we're going to ask further questions on this topic of whether Moshe Rabbeinu had the status of a kayin. Meisvei, Miriam mihaskira. Who is the one? Miriam, as we know, became a mitzayra for saying lashon hara about her brother. So who, you need a kayin to put someone to become a mitzayra. So who sequestered her as a mitzayra? Im time Moshe skira, Moshe zaru. Moshe is the zar, which is obviously going to be a problem. The ein zar, rayas and agayim. And zar cannot be ray and agayim. Im time Aaron is skira, Aaron karvu. Aaron is a brother. Ein karv raya, that's an agayim, and a karv can't see an agayim. The Mefarshim will ask, then why'd you have to say Moshe was because he was a zar? Moshe was also a karv just as much as Aaron was. The Baruch Shalom gave Miriam a great kavod. The Miriam Oisa Shah at that time, Ani Kayin v'ani maskira ani chalta v'ani paitra. I'm going to be the Kayin and I'm going to put her aside. I'm going to lock her up, and I'm going to wait to decide, and I'm going to tell her when the Mitzvah goes away. Katani miyas Moshe zar. But we said in the course of this that Moshe was a zar, not like Rav who said Moshe was the Kohen Gadol. The din of Maris Nagayim is not a din that has to do directly with Kahuna. It has to do with being a descendant of Aaron. The Torah says Aaron and his sons will be the one to see Nagayim. It's not because of the status as Kahuna. It's a yichus that has to do with them. So Moshe Rabbeinu was not from Bnei Aaron, so therefore he was excluded from Aris Nagai. Meisvei. Chamish Simchas Haisa Elisheva Yisera al Bnei Yisrael. Elisheva was the wife of Aaron, the sister of Nachshon, and she had 5 things that she could hold over the Gans Klal Yisrael, all the other women. Yevama Melech, her brother-in-law, Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron's brother, was her Yevama. If Aaron would die without children, Moshe would be the one to be Yam. Well, he was the king. Isha Kohen Gadol, her husband Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. Bena Skan, her son Elazar was the Skan Kohen Gadol. Ben Bena Meshuach Milchama, her son's son Pinchas ben Elazar was the Meshuach Milchama, the one appointed for Milchama. Va'achya Nasi, and her brother was Nachshon, was the Nasi Shevet. Va'avel al Shnei Bonel, but even so, it wasn't worth very much. But she still had to be misavel on her 2 sons, Nadav Avihu, who died at the Miluim. But in the course of this, we say Katani Miyasi Yavam Melech says that Moshe Rabbeinu was a Melech. He Melech in Kohen Gadol. So you see that Moshe Rabbeinu was not a Kohen because we identify him as a Melech, not as a Kohen Gadol. So Gemara Ema Af Melech. You could say not just a Kohen Gadol, but also a Melech, because Aaron was anyway a Kohen Gadol. So Moshe Rabbeinu was additionally on top of it was also a Melech. So this question about whether Moshe Rabbeinu was a Kohen is a Machlokes Tanoim. But Yicharaf Hashem b'Moshe. The Moshe was angry at Moshe when Moshe Rabbeinu was being recalcitrant. He was reluctant to take on the burden of going to Parai. Whenever the Torah discusses a charoin af, a burning anger, there's always some consequence. But there's no consequence set here. Rav Shimon ben Yochai says no, there wasn't a consequence. Says Aaron, it calls Aaron his brother a Levi. But he was a Kohen. Why was he called a Levi? Really, it was supposed to be that you, Moshe, was supposed to be the Kohen, and Aaron was supposed to be Levi. But now, instead, he's going to be the Kohen, you're going to be Levi. That's the first shita. The Chachamim say he only was a Kohen for the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim. The others say that no, Moshe Rabbeinu remained a Kohen, but the only consequence was that his children didn't become Kohanim after him. Shnema Moshe Ish Alikim Banav Yikaru al Shevet Levi says about Moshe that his children will be called part of Shevet Levi. And additionally, Moshe v'Aaron b'Koyanav u'Shmuel b'Koyrei Shemai. Moshe v'Aaron b'Koyanav. But that means only there that the kahuna will only be by Moshe and Aaron, and it won't go to his children. Zok the Gemara. So you see that the first 2 Mandamim say that either Moshe wasn't a Kohen at all, or he was only a Kohen for the Miluim, and then the last Shita, the last Tana holds that he was a Kohen, a full-fledged Kohen. His children just weren't Kohen. Why do we need two psukim to say he was a Kohen but not his children? If you'll say that which is said that what does that mean? What does that mean? Let me see Rashi. So the Gemara seems to be saying, what does it mean? Right, maybe it's just saying that those before him were Levium, but about Moshe Rabbeinu himself, it could be he was also We don't know whether he was a Levi, so it does not necessarily a machlekes tanoim, or the it wasn't enough sufficient proof. That's why it said va'omer to say that Moshe v'Aaron b'kayanov, that Moshe himself was a kain. Zok the Gemara. So, fracting Gemara. B'chol harav shebetoyer nemar by Roishim. Is it true that whenever there's a charay naf, there's always a consequence of a siv vayetze Moshe mi Parei b'chari af? That Moshe left Parei and he was angry at Parei because Parei would not let the Yidden go. And nothing happened to Parei. Amar Rebbeinu Shalom Sitra v'yatza. The Rebbeinu Shalom told him, Amar Shlakish, I'm sorry, Sitra v'yatza. Rishlakish says there wasn't nothing happened. He smacked him in the face as he left. So there was a consequence to Parei. Rishlakish really say that Moshe slapped Parei v'ksiv v'nitzavto l'krosei al svasei or. It says about Moshe that Moshe stood opposite Parei on the edge of the river. Rishlakish melechu. He was nitzav. He had to stand at attendance by him. But his bilay upon him. He had to stand at attention because Parei was a kohen. Was a melech. So you see that Rish Lakish holds. You do have to show cover to a melech. So how could it be that he slapped Parei? Rav Yochanan says means he stood against him. He spoke to him strongly. He didn't stand at attention, but rather he stood against him. So you have to say that what we said for B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan was really what Rish Lakish said. Rish Lakish is the man Amar who says that there was a consequence that Moshe slapped Parei. He was also the one who says Nitzavta means that he stood against it. Amar Rav Yanai, La'olam tehei emas malchus alecha. A person should always be fearful of the king. T'chsev yerdu kol avdecha ele elai. What's the pasuk? Let me see on the side. The pasuk says that he says he said that all of your avodim, Moshe Rabbeinu said, all your avodim will come bow down to me. He didn't say to Parei that he's going to bow down. I can bring you a ride from a different place. By Yisnam Masna Vayaratz Lufnei Achav. The Rebbe Shalom gave his yad to Eliyahu, and he picked himself up, and he ran in front of the wagon of Achav. Achav was the king, even though he was a terrible Rasha, but he gave cover to the king, and he ran in front of his wagon. Amar Ula, Bigish Moshe Malchus. Moshe wanted to be the Melech, he didn't become, it wasn't given to him. The Sev Altikarav Haloim. Don't come any closer. By the burning bush. Ve'en haloim ela malchus. Haloim is a reference to malchus. Shenamar mi anochi Hashem alikim ki v'noisi ad haloim. Where's this pasuk? V'yavei hamelech David v'yishav ni Hashem v'yem mi anochi adoni alikim mi beis ki aviani ad haloim. He said, who am I to be in this position of being the king? So haloim is a lashon of malchus. Masav Rava bar Rabbi Yishmael Omer Yavama Melech. We saw before that we said that Moshe that Elisheva was the Yavama. Her Yavama was a Melech. Moshe was the Melech. So how can we say now that he wanted to be the king, but the Rebbeinu Shalom said no? Amar Rava loy ulazari kama. He wanted to be a king he wanted to have a dynasty. He wanted to have his children rule after him. So that was what he was told no. Does the haloim always? But when it says haloim, it means forever. V'agabi shol to say of havay oid haloim ish. It says about Shol that it says use a lashon haloim on his melucha, and he was the only king. His dynasty died with him. So tomorrow, who in Zaroi loy? Moshe and Shaul was a king, but his Zar were not. So you might say, "Hahava ish boishes." Well, first you could say it said Haloim, and that means the Dairis, because he did have a son who was the king, even while David was the king. Eventually got kicked out, but there was a period where the son of Shaul was the king. Shaul did a Avera, and he was really supposed to be a king. and he was supposed to have his children be kings after him, but because of the Aver was taken away from him. Could the Rebbe Loza Amar Chanina, Bishosha, Poiskim Dula Ladam, Poiskim Lazari, Atseif Kal Adoris. When a person gets Gedula, it really goes to his children as well. Shanemal Yagara Mitzadik, Einav, Vesm Alochem, Lakisai. V'yishevim lenetzach v'yigveu, and they should be there forever, and they should be lifted up. When someone becomes, the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't take his eyes off a tzaddik, and the malachim stay in their on their kisei forever. V'imhig is daitai, but if he gets, if he becomes a gas ruach, if he becomes arrogant, like Shaul did in deciding not to kill Melech Hagag in spite of the instructions from the Navi, the next pasuk says, and if they're going to do the wrong thing, they're going to be trapped. They're going to be put into chains and tied up in ropes. Meaning they're going to ropes of being a oini. They're going to become nidrig. They're going to become like the lowest of Klal Yisrael because of their chatayin. Okay, we're going to stop over here. As Hashem, tomorrow, 6:30, we'll continue.